Hello, welcome back on Horizons, episode 83 review. And this is a great story episode as it begins with the explorers all plotting to meet and ambush the rising Vault Tacklers in Rakua, with Spinel in particular being relied on by Gibeon, with Spinel also playing down Amethio, Hammer in particular responding to that. Amethio, Zora and Konya are in Exceed at Spinel's lab. Meanwhile, it's nice having a calm moment with rising Vault Tacklers watching Rayquaza and Terapagos fly about. Since they're headed to Rakua, anything could go down and the three notes are a threat of the explorers. But doesn't think that they're being followed as he wants to avoid tipping them off that that's where they're off to. There's also them thinking about Requiem, its effect on Pokemon White is called an Eternal Blessing, and getting Molly's input on how Requiem could be a biological thing was pretty cool as it really highlights why she's a doctor, and she's going to talk about like cells and all that, which are some part in the story later in this episode. Reed also puts together that Gibeon could be using Requiem on himself to keep himself alive. Really, this whole section of speculation and theory crafting as the state of Rakua, the explorer's objectives, and all that is really great. And the kids being excited, not fearful, is always a treat, reminding the adults why I've been on this adventure. Amethio is on Spinel's computer and gets busted as he's getting info and somehow the Exceed guards manage to capture him and his grunts. Spinel and Agate approach Gibeon, asking about his body, and Spinel really sucks up saying that Gibeon must live on forever. It definitely feels like Spinel's plotting stuff, as this sort of attitude feels a bit forced. Amethio is also able to figure out that Spinel saw right through him, which is how they've been captured. It's Hambu who comes to their rescue, returning their Pokemon. It's quite nice to see him doing this, considering he still has some loyalty to Amethio after he got kicked off missions, berating Amethio for acting reckless, but we both have concerns about Spinel. Amethio thinking Spinel will be betraying Gibeon. Amethio wants to know everything about Requiem, about Lucius, to save Gibeon and find out what his role is in this whole thing will be. And man, is Amethio's family loaded. They're taking this opulent mansion, we get to see a portrait of Amethio's mother. What I like here is how he's also invited Zora and Konya in, which shows a trust and opening up that he's done to them, and gives him a chance to exposit as we find out that she died in a traffic accident when she was a child. And he definitely plays it off coolly, but I think there's a lot of hurt that drives his action underneath there. Hamber was that man that raised him, which explains why Hamber cares for and looks after Amethio so much. This feels like a parallel to episode 75 in a way, as we're getting the story of the past, but from Gibeon's words. It's fantastic hearing how Gibeon considered Lucius his closest friend, as they wanted to connect the world of people and Pokemon the same way. Of course they diverged when Lucius wanted to stop Gibeon from taking Requiem, and Maturin top was Rayquaza apparently telling Zygarde to seal the Requiem, explaining why it also betrayed Gibeon despite being his Pokemon. It could have been written off as protecting the ecosystem as its role, you know, but that's an interesting new layer to the Rakua incident. Hamber also explains the Zygarde cells, and remember when I said cells would come up again in this episode? Anyway, so Hamber has one, and it's cool to see that they designed a shiny cell for it. Found out that Requiem is the reason Gibeon survived, which was expected really. Hamber tells us that Requiem is pretty much a source of life and can extend said lifespans, so Gibeon used what he had to survive and invest in the future Pokemon, using Exceed to research Requiem. And Hamber had followed Gibeon out of respect, being given purpose and guidance from Gibeon, as Hamber was a mere adventurer, and his desire to help Pokemon prosper resonated with Hamber. Of all the Explorer admins, Hamber would go on to train 4 of them, the only exception being Spinel, who was personally chosen by Gibeon, going from working at sea to joining Explorers to potentially wanting to use Gibeon to get his own hands on Requiem. I feel like we don't get a lot of Amethio interacting with his Pokemon, but I love a scene where he gets up, talks to Sarah Ledge saying it's been with him since childhood, going through training and tough missions and always being there, relying on him once more to help him with this mission. Also backdrop of pictures from the past. Also Liko being related to Lucius and Ristle doesn't really surprise Amethio, which is kind of funny. Amethio's made his decision too. He won't fight for Gibeon, but will take his will as his own. And he's not defined by the past and will forge his own way. Hamber will mask their tracks and wishes them luck as they leave for Rakua. We see the mound of Requiem with his Zygarde cells. It's not the end of the episode, however, as Rayquaza roars, alerting the rising Vault Tacklers. There's a town, and while the kids think it's not Rakua, the way Rayquaza jumps against the crew is hilarious, and it's a really good reinforcement of the scale it has from the last episode. Its face is like the same size as a bridge, and it flies through the clouds. Liko thinks that Rakua is through there, and all ask to yell, no, they can't, as the ship's at a safe altitude. They're pretty much there, they just have to land and go and explore the rest. So yeah, this is a nice mature feeling episode that balanced out the story we heard in episode 75, and really does set the stage for Rakua on the Explorer side as well. Leaves me eager to see what shenanigans Spinel's going to pull. I think he's my favourite Explorer. And also seeing how Amethio is going to fight is going to be exciting.